Alright, the first piece that we're going to work on is the top front. You can tell it's the top front because it has the top of the eye slit. What we need to do is to begin to crease this front piece. If you're not going to be putting in the crease, then you can just ignore this portion. The way I start is by taking it on the sharp edge of the anvil, or of the bighorn, and just using my body weight to give it some of its initial form. I then take it and set it flat on the anvil, or the bighorn, as the case may be. I tend to call it an anvil sometimes. And hammer along its top edge. Using a flat-faced hammer with a polished face. If I hold the piece steady enough, I can begin to develop a nice straight crease running down the top. I'm also making sure that I'm hitting the hammer parallel to the face of the bighorn. That way I don't gouge it or move the piece. I then take the piece and flip it over and do the same thing from the other side. I've now formed a rudimentary crease, and that's enough for now. What I next need to do is to take the rest of the piece and to make it, to give it a nice round shape. I do this by sort of brute forcing the piece over the anvil, as a round portion of the bighorn. You can also do it by using a hammer. Once again, I'm using my rawhide hammer because it doesn't scar the metal. What I do is I take the piece and rest it on the anvil, and then simply allow a little portion of it to hang off the edge and hammer on it. I'm not actually hammering onto the anvil. The anvil's there to give me something round to form it around. Now I've formed it. You notice that it is much more tightly curled than it needs to be for its final product. So all I do is simply open it up a little bit. And I hammer some more. Alright, now you can see that I have the piece formed more or less the way I want it. I can still play with it. It's not formed completely. There'll still be a little bit more forming when we get ready. But more or less, the piece is to the shape that I'd like it to have. It's a more or less horseshoe shape. I'm going to do the same thing with the back plate. The back plate also has a crease in it. That's one of the features of this helm. In fact, it's a feature of many of the barrel helms. This is a feature that's commonly left off because I think most photographs don't show the helms from the back. So once again, I start by doing the same thing I did last time, which is putting the crease in the back. Begin by using my body weight to do it with. I'm doing this once again by using my body weight to help form the piece. Basically what I've done here is I've taken both halves and formed them more or less to the right shape. And what I have to do now is fit them together. Next thing I need to do is take 2 pairs of vice grips. I use the vice grips to allow the helm to be held together. What I do is I take the helm, take whichever side I think fits up better, and overlap at the proper distance. I tend to use about a 3/4 of an inch overlap. I take the vice grip, secure it in place, and then move the other side till it meets in the correct place. Then take it around the bighorn This side fits up pretty well. Now all I have to do is make this side fit equally well. At this point, I basically have the top half of the helm set up in the way that I want it set up. Now all I have to do is fit the cap to it. Now that we have the helm set up together, what I'm going to do is use this tool. It's called a Roper Whitney punch. What it is essentially a giant paper punch for steel. You notice there's bolts sticking out. No, I'm not trying to create Frankenhelm. I'm bolting it together because I find that it works better for the process of punching the holes. Once this piece is made, I then need to create a pattern. I'm laying it out on a piece of cardboard for expedience because I don't want to move the camera up to where I cut the metal. But basically all I do is I take it, I set it down on the sheet of metal, take a magic marker, draw from the inside a tracing of the helm. That's pretty simple. I then kind of flesh out the lines, and I have a pattern for the top piece. The next tool I'm going to be using is a flat top stake. This flat top stake I like because it has a rounded face. I then take the helm and draw a line around it, about 3/4 of an inch down. I rest my barrel helm top against it and begin to hammer. This is perhaps the toughest part of what we'll do. I'm just going to work my way around the whole edge. Right now it's pretty wavy, but that'll all go away eventually. The last couple ripples that are left in the helm tend to be the toughest to take out. But given enough time and perseverance and enough brute force and abuse, you can do just about anything. Alright, that's the second pass. You notice it's sort of spread out to the side. That's not a major problem. It's easily fixed later. But it's still fairly ripply. On the third and final pass, I'll go through and take out some of the last little ripples. I've now taken out all of the major ripples, and all that's left is some little inconsistencies that can be taken out later. The next thing I have to do is to remove these parts where it's spread apart. So I simply pop out the two screws, nuts and bolts, and work on it from there. Beat it around a little bit, and eventually it'll get back into line. Notice I'm raising it down to just about flat. I'll eventually kick it up a little bit to accommodate the fact that the helm has a dome top. But for right now, having a flat top is easier for me to get all the inconsistencies out. Now I'll do the same thing to this side. We have the top of the helm more or less formed. Now all we have to do is make it just right. All I'm doing is I'm taking the hammer and hitting both on the... I'm taking the hammer, hitting both on the top, right flat on the anvil, the stake that is, and then hitting on this face of the stake. hitting both faces, and I can give myself a nice clean flute or crease. Eventually you develop a nice sharp crease all the way around the helm. There's still some rippling, but it's not very bad and it's very easily dealt with. What I'll do is I'll start by taking the top cap piece, which I've cut out, spreading it across the dishing form, and using the rounded face of a rawhide mallet, begin working on the outsides and just work it down into the bowl. By the way, this is very loud. This piece has now got the beginnings of a dished form. It's fairly shallowly dished, but by putting it into the dish at angles other than simply setting it in, I can take it even deeper. I've now taken this helmet hat, or a helmet top, deck plate, out to a reasonable depth. You can see it's fairly deep. I've done it using this dish and a deeper one. Now that I've gotten this piece to where I want it, I've got it dished essentially as a circle. But since the piece is an oval, what I have to do is make these sides, which dip down, come up a little bit so they'll be more appropriate for the shape of the helm that I'm doing. So I'm simply putting it on the anvil and reshaping it a little bit, making it a little longer and a little thinner. That's a little closer to what I want. I then put the piece inside and see how it fits. It seems to fit all right. So all I have to do is make the helm fit it. What I'm going to do now is take them from flat to an angle at which I can use them more effectively. An angle that I can use them more effectively would be one which sticks up slightly, because the dome top will take an angle like that much more easily. So all I'm doing is laying it flat up here, pulling backwards with this hand as I hammer with the flat of the face. I'm taking the top cap and forming it so it's a little bit closer to the shape that I want it. So I'm working mostly at the ends here, not in the center. Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm using my trusty drill press to drill out the holes in the top cap. I'm setting it, or the holes that hold the top cap. Setting it upside down on here, and I'll just drill through the holes at the pre-marked spots. I pre-mark all my holes because it makes it much easier to get them accurate. Okay, now that I've taken the helm over to the drill press, I've drilled out all of the holes that go along the top, and I've bolted it back together. Then take the top part, which fits pretty well at this point, and fit it into the top. You see, it fits pretty good. Then what I do is I take a magic marker and mark the holes. Okay, the top cap is fitted. Fits really nice and well, and all the holes are drilled and ready for the rivets. You notice I haven't riveted the helmet together yet. I won't do any riveting on the helmet until after I've finished the entire helm. All the pieces will be fit, will put together real well. I'll take it apart and then I'll clean it up. I'll take off all the rust, I'll take out all the hammer marks, I'll sharpen up all the creases, make it fit up and set up and look really nice. Then I'll rivet it together, because the riveting is the last stage. Once again, I'm going to take it, set it on the sharp edge of the bighorn, and just use my body weight to bend its crease in there. Once I've done that, I take my trusty ball peen Use the flat face. And begin the creasing operation. I sometimes overlap it, but I never hit like this. If you hit like this, you'll crack the metal. The next step, just as before, is simply taking the metal, using your body weight to bend it. Now you see, I bent this much farther than it needs to go, but metal is pretty flexible, and you can just unbend it if you take it too far. It's a little too far. Straighten it up a little bit. Straighten it out if it gets crooked. Looks pretty straight to me. Now the key is taking this and making it fit this. Remember to watch for top and bottom and make your creases line up. Okay, at this point, the bottom piece more or less fits, but the curves don't match on this level, but here they do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it over to the ball stake and hammer this a little bit round so that it all fits in. Fits up much closer. Now I do the same thing with this plate. Okay, it's fitting up much closer at this point, and it's ready for bolts, I think. With a couple of bolts at the sides, we can make the rest fit. Alright, at this point, we have the back plate attached. All that's left to do is attach the faceplate, and we're all set. Alright, on the last plate, we're doing the same thing. The only thing different here is this little eye separation bar. Isolate ocularium separation bar will not want to bend as easily as the rest of it. So when we put it on the anvil to bend it, it probably won't bend. The rest of the helm will, or the rest of the visor will. Sometimes you'll have trouble bending the tip. Easy ways to do it is simply place it over a vise that's a little bit open, find a favorite chisel, and give it a few friendly taps to bend it into place. Shaping, forming, making it all fit up nice. How much you have to do is take the piece and see how it fits. On the reproduction helm we're doing, this bar goes on the inside. I think normally this would go on the outside, simply up to here. But on this particular example, it goes on the inside. So one of the things you can do in order to help it is to take it over to a small ball stick, if you have one. Otherwise, use the back of a ball peen hammer. And just hit it over it to kind of bend it backwards so that it wants to come in. At this point, the helm is all drilled and all the holes are made. Basically, all that's left to do is take out all the nuts and bolts and polish up all the pieces. Then the helm is ready for its final riveting. At that time, I'll also roll the back edge, and while I have it apart, I will file the edges on all the plates so they're nice and round and have no more burrs. I'll also take down any corners that are sharp on the plates and try to get it as good as possible. When I'm done, I'll put the helm back together, I'll rivet it, and it'll be all finished. What I have the barrel helm clamped in is called a bead roller, or a bead rolling jenny. It's a tool that dates from the Middle Ages, and it hasn't changed a whole lot since its original inception. Essentially what it's designed to do is to put a roll into the edge or center of a piece. It takes a top die, which fits into a groove on a bottom die, and moves the metal into it so it begins to form a bead. Once this bead is in place, I'll be able to take the edge and turn it over quite easily. This is not a tool that you need to have. It's a tool that I've only recently acquired. Until now, I've been doing it by hand. And I'll give a demonstration after I've shown how the bead roller is used on how to do it by hand. The same process, without having all the fancy tools. Essentially what I'm going to do is simply take the metal and crank it through the dies of the bead roller jenny. It's going to be most difficult to get through right here at the back where there's a flute running down the bottom deck plate. This is fairly simple to crank through once you've figured out exactly how it works, and it's a valuable tool. It makes the job much easier. I then take it, tighten it up a little bit, and run the helm through again. Whether or not the bead is in place, the process is the same. I find it's a little easier with the bead on the back of the helmet, but it's not necessary. All I do in order to turn this edge is to hook it over the point of my bighorn and use a hammer to turn the edge. You notice that this plate is slightly longer than this plate. This will all be taken care of in the roll. What I'm going to do now is finish turning this rolled edge. This is simply done over a rounded corner on the anvil. This side is round, this side is fairly short. Basically what I do is I place the helm on the anvil, but only hanging this little lip that I've created over the edge. Then take my helm and pound it roundly. Okay, now these two corners I can't finish until the helm is taken apart because they're restricted by the amount of movement in the helm. So basically, I've created my rolled edge, and all the angles and all the bits and details of this helm are finished. All I have to do is take it apart and polish it, and then be ready to be finished by putting in the rivets. The next step, now that all the pieces have been taken apart and polished, more or less, is to take a fairly fine-toothed file and to go through and round all the edges. Is learning to rivet, because that's what we're doing most of through the rest of the helm. I've taken two bits of scrap metal to illustrate this point. They have a matching hole and a rivet. This is simply a 3/16 inch pan head rivet, fairly readily available. It's not the exact type of rivet I'll be using for the helm, but it illustrates the point fairly clearly. I take a ball peen hammer. I use a nice light one. Sometimes I wear a glove on my left hand when I'm peening, so in case I nick myself, I'm alright. What I do is I put them through the holes and begin to hit around the outside edges. You notice this makes a lot of noise, so be prepared. Basically, you may want to wear some form of hearing protection to save your ears, but otherwise, most people find it's alright not to use any. You see, I've hit around the outside of the edges. I don't want to hit in the very center of the rivet, because that'll just spread it out and make the rivet shorter. by hitting along the outside edges, I spread the rivet out wider. The next step is to continue along the same lines by using the real pieces. The rivets are peened on the inside of the helm. I find that this is sometimes a little bit of a problem because you can't always get to it. So you wind up using some strange things as hammers. But basically, it's the same procedure. I start by placing a rivet in a hole, putting it on the lead block anvil, and start by hammering it over. For the sake of this particular helm, I'm going to go ahead and rivet them right on the anvil. A lot of people would argue with this. It doesn't seem to bother me, so it really doesn't matter. And basically you'll be all set. You continue to put all the rivets in on this part, and then you can work on the top part. We fit the plate as before, but we have to peen using almost a drop method. So what I do is I set it on the anvil, and I take my stake, I'm going to peen downward. Okay, now I have all four corners attached. I then start working at cross purposes, and eventually it'll all start to come into shape. The next step is to take the back plate and rivet it on. And begin to rivet. Once again, I just barely peen this first rivet over, so it makes the rest of the helm easier to put together. Then I pick one of the sides, start with this side, pick a rivet, place it in the hole, and begin to work. Okay, now this plate is fit. In order to do the front plate, we start by slipping these two edges over the other plates and the nasal bar under. Place it through. And you're ready to go. Start by riveting that one fairly loosely so the helm can still turn and you can get your plates to sit just like they need to. Pick a rivet hole. I'm starting with the bottom one, but it really doesn't matter which one you start with. And paint it over. Okay, now all that's left is tightening up that center rivet for the nasal bar. And your helm is essentially finished. Now all that's left to do is to give it the exact shape you want and do any detail work that you'd like to do on it. That's basically all there is to making a helm, and I think you'll find that if you try it, you'll enjoy making some of this. Go out and try this project and enjoy it. It's a fun thing to do, and basically it's not terribly difficult. It's the easiest armor making project that I can think of, and if you like this, you may try some other things. Well, I hope you try it, and happy armoring.